Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. Was it evil or an honest mistake? That's one of the questions the jury's tasked with answering during the trial of Hayden Berkebile. His online relationship with 19-year-old Grace Sparks grew equal parts intimate and twisted. And as the two were known to engage in games of Russian roulette with the defendant watching as the victim would tempt fate. The next witness up, a detective interviewed the defendant, talked to him all about it. Let's take a look at how it all went down.
That's why I was asking. That's why I was asking.
What do you think?
No idea.
I'm here for one of two reasons.
Okay.
Number one, you can give me a plausible explanation because I know you got some trouble going on with me. So, I'm willing to accept plausible explanation. Number two, you're the most just evil on the face of the earth. So either one, you have some issues, which I've known you have some issues, which it leads you to make poor decisions. I can accept that. I'm not the most non-judgmental human being you are ever going to meet in your life. I don't judge anybody. I ain't never moral enough to judge anybody. But I'm giving you an opportunity to offer me an explanation. So when I go back to work Monday, I can look the DA in the eye and I can say, do got issues. Do got issues and use a bad judgment. So either you're a decent person, in which, from what I've worked into you, you're a decent person, but you use bad judgment. So I may be wrong. You may not be a decent person. You just may be evil, bad. But I'm going to start out under the premise that you're a decent guy who got some issues, who uses bad judgment. And I can live with that. But if you want to prove me wrong, you can prove me wrong. Okay? Is that fair? I'm all around fairness. Okay? So, tell me, why do you think I'm here?
Well, there's this Grace Sparks.
You remember talking to me now?
I don't remember you specifically. I remember talking to somebody.
And then I said, you said, okay, can you call me back? And I was having a good time. I said, okay. And then when I called you back, what'd you say?
You didn't call me back.
Yeah, I did. I called you back and you said, oh, we'll talk to lawyer first.
No, I left a message in there.
Yeah.
I just...
Yeah. Because at that point, I'm like, at that point I was feeling like, you know, this terrible tragic thing has happened, which both of you all had gotten caught up in some lifestyle and got out of control. So, either you're a decent person who made poor decisions, you have allowed the line between fantasy and reality to blur for you, which I think that's the case, or you're just an evil. So, do you want to tell me which one you are? If you want to have a conversation about this, I want to have this conversation so I can go back and I can talk to my boss and say I sat down and I talked with him and this is what's going on with him. Is that fair?
That's fair.
I want you upset, man. I need you to feel better, okay?
I don't know if I can do that.
Why do you think I traveled from Knoxville all the way here? Do you think if I thought you were just a crazy evil bad would I have wasted my time, separated myself from my family, to drive all the way up here to hear what you said, to hear what you had to say? So if I didn't want to hear what you had to say, brother, I'd be home, I wouldn't be up here in this cold ass weather. Because you have one opportunity to convince me that you ain't a bad dude. Today is Thursday, February 13th, 2020. Investigator Chance, Jurors, Knoxville Police Department. Currently on with Mr. Hayden Berkebile. This is going to be reference case number 19-040300. Okay, Hayden, you ever had your rights read to you before? I tell people all the time, relax, okay? This is the only part that's not up to you. Okay? Just relax and breathe. Okay. Hayden Berkebile, February 13, 2020. Our time is 8:32 p.m. All right, this is a statement of your rights. Before asking any questions, you must understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to consult with a lawyer, to have a lawyer present with you while you are being questioned. If you want a lawyer, let you know pay for one. The lawyer will give you the funds to represent you for any cost to you. If you decide to answer questions not all lawyer present, you also have the right to stop answering anytime until you speak to a lawyer. Lawyer, with my rights, I understand each of my rights. I'm going to make a statement and answer questions without lawyer present. My promises or threats have been made to me. You understand all that? What's the highest grade you completed?
Freshman year.
Freshman year? I do have one question.
To be fair, I was going to GED, but yeah.
I didn't have one question. Why did you go to Alaska?
Why not?
I would like to go to Alaska. That's why I asked.
Why not?
Why would you leave? That is like
My family.
my place.
My dad sent me leaving.
And that's where you were from, son?
No. My dad's here.
Okay, you came back.
Yeah. He said he needed me.
I consider that to be one of the most beautiful places on earth.
It's pretty beautiful. I have a question for you.
Sure.
If at any point I sign this, I can still ask for a lawyer, correct?
Yeah. All this is saying that you're willing to give me your version of events. It doesn't bother you anything that's in use.
Can I take my neck off?
Please, no problem. Let me tell you the type of person I am. I'm not judgment. It ain't my job to judge it. I want to sit here. I want to give you your chance to give you a version of events. I pretty much know what all these versions of events are from the time that you two encountered each other years and years ago. Let me tell you how I operate. And then, if this is fair with you, you can tell me it's fair with you, because I think it's always fair. Because I always treat people like this, because that's what I want to be treated. I will listen to anything you have to say to me, okay? With zero judgment. But at the point when you tell me a lie, I will stand up, I will walk out the door, and I will say, I'm done. Because I'm going to give you what I think everybody deserves, okay? Tell me to tell you.
Oh, and there's so much more we're going to show you of this interview that the detective did with Hayden Berkebile. Stand by. We'll be right back after this quick break.
That's okay. That's sure. Beautiful young girl. Yeah, that's all right. That's the choice. Did you tell me that?
One of my best friends, man. I share everything. Talk every day.
Thanks for being with us on this Tuesday afternoon. I'm Julie Grant. So prosecutors in the coerced suicide trial are laying out a very well-organized case against defendant Hayden Berkebile. After showing the jury more than 1,300 messages between Berkebile and victim Grace Sparks, the state showed the jury the police interview between the defendant and Detective Chaz Terry. Here you'll see Berkebile explaining his relationship with Sparks, how long the troubled couple had been talking online, how things turned sexual, and some of the very serious issues that Sparks was dealing with at the time.
What would you like to know? Like, just
Start from the start.
we've been online. We both been through hard stuff.
And you know what? Because I have to be able to. I know you're going through some stuff, and I know you've been through some stuff. You got to illustrate that stuff.
Right, we're both suicidal. We both didn't want to live anymore. I'm not running through a support area. I think we went through a Lego because we were both like, just looking for people to talk to.
And say the dates.
I don't remember. Yeah, I honestly don't. If I had dates, I give them to you. But
How long ago now?
It's 2020.
How do people say about 8 years?
Let's see. No. Been about 6 years.
Some states. Okay. So it's about 6 years ago. Okay, I'm sorry.
About 6 years ago in line. We're both very suicidal.
What drew you into suicidal ideation?
I was abused as a child.
Okay.
Heavily. Sexually, mentally, and physically. My stepmother. And I couldn't get over myself. I couldn't get over the hatred for myself. And through trying therapy, and then two therapists said they couldn't help me because they didn't have the expertise. Anyways, we were just, I was looking for someone to talk to, someone that didn't hate me, that as much as I didn't hate myself. We started talking. We were friends for years. And then I lied to her about being married. We talked on and off. She got really emotionally invested in me. I told her we couldn't do anything because she was underage.
And let me tell you this. I know that y'all did while she was still underage. I don't care about that. I don't care about that. I'm not the underage police. I am that police. You have to stay with the truth, right? Because when you divert from the truth, you diminish your character. I need you to stay so on point and maintain your character. So you have to be truthful about things.
Right.
I know y'all when she was underage.
I never thought she was underage.
You can tell me you didn't know she was underage.
No, we talked back and forth, but I didn't meet her until last summer. For real, I never even met her until last summer. When she got home, June, July. Yeah, anyways. I ended up being married. She left. I quit talking to her. We started talking again. Things got more sexual.
When did y'all start talking again?
2 years ago.
Who reached out to?
She reached out to me. We started talking again. At that point, my marriage became open. So we could see other people, talk to other people, do other things. And she had told me at the time that her boyfriend Jim would have her work open because he was in the military and he was going overseas or I don't know. Anyways, we started talking, things got sexual, and then
What was the first time you had sex with her?
like actual sex. Well, it's last July, last June.
When she went, where?
She came here.
Where y'all stay?
I was at my mom's house here at the time, coming to Ellisville. She came up for like 3 days. And we had fun, had a good time. She went back, stretching and more depressed. A lot of the play and stuff that we did was an outlet for her because it would make her feel wanted if I would make her stop. I would make her stop. She was heavily into cutting. I made her stop doing that. She started doing that again. She started self-harm. She started talking about being suicidal again. I told her to reach out to her boyfriend. When she got back to Tennessee, she told me that her boyfriend weren't open anymore. I didn't stop.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. That's sure.
Beautiful young girl.
Yeah, that's the choice that two we made.
One of my best friends, man. We share everything. Talk every day. Anyways, she started getting worse and worse. She liked to play Russian roulette, which was something that, I always made sure she could firearm. I always made sure that it was safe. We only used a revolver because it was safer, so we didn't do it. So she could show me that it was empty. So coming up to that day, she asked if I could go down there. I said I wasn't going to be able to. We started getting into it. She started playing a video called her. Then she started getting extreme and saying she didn't want to do this anymore and I begged her not to. Basically, I was trying to talk her down. She said it didn't matter anymore. She was never going to be able to see me. She was never going to be able to have me or Jim. No one was ever going to love her. And then I saw her grab a bullet and I told her to do it. And she moved the camera and I heard a gunshot and that's when I told you guys.
Are you diagnosed with anything?
No.
Were you drinking that day? You use drugs?
Smoke cigarettes.
Smoke cigarettes. Then, whether you're not under any intoxicants, any alcohol, then whatever conditions you are battling have terribly skewed your memory. Because those are not the events as they occur. So, you can tell me, and I can accept that I don't remember, but I can't accept it. And you know, and I totally get it, Hayden. I totally get it. To embrace all of this in its entirety means looking at some things that are unpleasant. It means looking at some things that are unpleasant. As human beings, what we try to do, before we can embrace things in its entirety, we always try to minimize our role in it. That's not just on you. That's as human beings. We learn that from the time we're kids. It takes a minute for us to embrace things that are unpleasant.
This is really gripping to watch, isn't it? Let me bring in my guests, see what they think of this retired DEA Special Agent Ted Golden in Atlanta, Georgia, and criminal defense attorney Greg Isaacs in Knoxville, Tennessee. Agent Golden, I want to begin with you on this one. Tell us what you think of this detective's interrogation tactics.
He's doing a good way of getting the guy to understand it. If he didn't trust him, he would have walked out of the place or asked for an attorney. So he's gotten his confidence and he's letting him know he wants to help him. He wants to understand it. So he's done a real good job of leveling himself up. I think the idea is that the fellow doesn't know that the detective's seen everything and read everything. So he's trying to give himself a lot less credit for what happened. And it's obvious that it's bothered him, but he's walked into a door that he's only one way out of. That's the truth.
Yeah, it's like we saw in the last segment what you said about the establishing of the trust, right? It was like that was just sort of setting the scene, making him feel comfortable, making him feel like he can talk. And now that he's got him talking, we saw him call him out there. I mean, he essentially called him out like, you know, if you're not on drugs or drinking, you know, then something's really wrong with your memory, because that is not how it happened. Agent Golden, what did you think? Was that the right point to do it and to say, sir?
Well, you know, one of the hardest things to do with people who have a criminal mind is to make them think that you're on their side and that you're going to listen to their story. And once you get them to bite, they can get the hook in, they'll come through with whatever it is they think is going to be believable to you. And in this situation, he provided some confirmation that he was aware of the circumstances and that he did his best to remedy it. And that in itself, that puts him in a position now to be able to come back and say, okay, well, that's not quite what happened. Can you like come forward with the right answer, rather than saying, well, you know, I'm on drugs, or I was drinking, or I smoked a little bit and I kept maybe not remembering what I said or did, but, you know, let me think about it for a minute.
Yeah, I've been really digging this interview and just the way that he approached it and said, you know, let me know what you did so I can go back to my boss. You know, he gives him that credit up front. You know, are you a good, decent person who just had some bad judgment? There is so much more to come, and I have so many more questions for you both. Agent Ted Golden, Attorney Greg Isaacs are going to stay with me and want you to do the same. When we come back after this break, we'll see Detective Chaz Terry continuing his interview with Hayden Berkebile and confronting him with some very hard truths. That's next.
At 459-1528.
This is Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. I'm Julie Grant. Sex, lies, and Facebook messages. That's one way to describe the very destructive relationship between Hayden Berkebile and Grace Ann Sparks. In 2019, 29-year-old Berkebile was charged with criminally negligent homicide in the death of the 19-year-old after she pointed a gun at her head and shot herself. Prosecutors allege that the couple was engaging in a sadistic relationship of BDSM and that Sparks killed herself under the direction of Berkebile, who spent years controlling and manipulating the teen. Berkebile's defense team countered that argument, claiming that the two mutually engaged in suicide role play, but that Berkebile didn't want Sparks to die. So who will the jury believe? We left off last hour with an interview of the defendant being conducted by police detective Chaz Terry. Terry's about to confront Berkebile about whether he wants to tell the truth or continue with the lies. Let's watch.
Has anybody ever killed themselves in front of you while you're video chatting with them? And so the fact that the mere suggestion of this excited you so much to the point where you had to when she first mentioned it. There's an element of shame associated with that. There's an element of guilt associated with that. So that is hard to accept. That is hard to accept in your head. And so what you do is you manufacture events so you can find them acceptable to you. Because it doesn't, it removes you from any culpability. The bad thing in this is that you have culpability. And you'll either proceed about this one of two ways. There's only one of two ways to proceed about this. You're so past the point of, I didn't do nothing, I didn't say nothing, I didn't help make this up. You're past that. So we're cool with that. to be controlling my issues. Hey, it's not my job to fuss at you. And I'm not fussing at you. But I know you got issues. I know you got problems. You know what? Look at me, dude. I've been there and done that. My mom was a heroin addict, so I know what it's like to be homeless, hungry, abused in ways that no child should be abused. I know I've been there, done that. Okay? But the making of a man is holding your I can accept any version of the truth. But you don't get to sit here and lie to me. So, yeah, you've endured some horrendous you know what? I endure some horrendous We all endure horrendous Grace endures some horrendous So you have one or two things to do. Only do what you put in your review or manufacture that you think is acceptable, that you think you're going to tell me that I'm going to believe. No, I'm not going to believe it because I already know the truth. I know from A to Z. I've run up here to gauge your character. I've run up here to see what type of person I'm dealing with. But when I'm dealing with somebody who did they're sorry for it, they made mistakes, went too far. So if I'm dealing with a little bit of it, all he's going to do is try to cover his ass and not accept responsibility. If I had zero faith in you, trust me, I wouldn't be here. If I thought you bad, miserable human being, I would not be here. I did not drive hundreds of miles to listen to I drove hundreds of miles because I thought somebody was going to have character, tell me, you know what, I got some going on with me, and this is what we're working to. That happens every day. That's acceptable. This you trying to reframe events, that's not acceptable.
Oh, I love what this detective is doing. Let me bring in my guests to see what they think of this. I have with me retired DEA Special Agent Ted Golden in Atlanta, Georgia, and criminal defense attorney Greg Isaacs in Knoxville, Tennessee. Greg, let me start with you on this one, please. We know that early on when the two of them sat down and the defendant was given his rights pursuant to Miranda versus Arizona and signed the form. He asked the question, at any point, if I decide that I want a lawyer, am I bound by this? And the detective said, no, you can do that. But here he's talking, the detective's getting really worked up. As a criminal defense attorney, what do you think when you watch an interview like this?
Well, Julie, it goes to show this is a classic example that an audio-video recorded interview in a criminal case is much more dynamic and powerful than a written statement. It started out very raw, very direct, and basically the interrogation paradigm was giving Berkebile two choices. You are either the most despicable human being on the face of the earth, or you have a justification to explain your conduct. So, as Ted Golden said, you see him trying to establish that rapport, which he has done effectively, masterfully, throughout this interrogation. But then, as you sit here and you're waiting for the 800-pound gorilla, where is Miranda? And suddenly, about a quarter of the way into it, and it's amazing how quickly a detective can read your Miranda rights where you can barely understand or hear a word they're uttering. He reads the Miranda rights, and then when Berekebile says, if I want to ask for a lawyer later, the detective says, Detective Terry, well, this isn't binding. Well, I'm sorry, that's not true. He gets an A in rapport building and interrogation. He gets an F in constitutional Miranda waivers because this is not only binding, but this makes this statement admissible in this trial.
Very true. I had a feeling you might say that, Greg Isaacs, as we were watching it, and I couldn't interrupt, obviously, as we've pulled these pieces of tape that are so interesting. So yeah, the detective, he's doing his job. He's got a job to do. Greg, you have your job, obviously, as a criminal defense attorney, you know how to do well, and Ted Golden, you certainly know how to do your job well as an investigator. For many years, first in local police in the state of Tennessee, and then later on for the federal government, being DA DEA. So tell me, this is really heating up. You know, where we left off, this detective, it's really getting good, and he's calling him out and calling him out, and then the defendant goes to the excuses. Well, I was abused. How many, of us could have predicted that, the kind of waiting to get to that point he was going to offer something? Do you see that often where, people try to, well, let me justify my horrific behavior by, talking about myself and what I've gone through?
For me?
Yes, please, Agent.
Well, yeah. A lot of times you'll find people who want to draw from their own childhood experiences as justification for how they are behaving. And I'm gonna put him where he is. He's a pimp, and he got caught in the Cadillac where the girls have been giving him the money, and we saw him. And he's sitting in the car right now talking to the cops and trying to figure out how he can explain why they're giving him money. Trying to explain why this girl did what she did, and he was controlling her mind, body, and soul. And that's what pimping does. It takes that mind and it turns him into this weak person that thinks they got to please the pimp. And that's what the girl was doing. She was pleasing him as a pimp. And now he's gotten caught. He's got the money in his hands, and he's trying to figure out, how can I justify having all this in my hands? But realistically, it's obvious because again, the investigator knows the answers to the questions he's asking, and that's the good thing, because regardless of how this guy responds, the truth has already been known. It's going to come out eventually.
Love the pimp analogy. That is brilliant. And it makes me think of another question I've had, Agent Golden, since we started covering this trial. Looking at this guy, one thing I wondered was, are there more young women? Like, was Gracie Ann Sparks the only one? Curious if you had that question come to your mind as well.
Given that he's online, the likelihood is high that he's done this before. Maybe not to this success that he's had with her, but I'm sure he's done it on occasion. I don't know if they pulled his hard drive, if it still exists, to find out who he was engaging with online, or if they pulled his online profile to see who else he was having conversations with. But the classic with people like him, he gets off on this. He's like the God, and he's in a position to control everything and everybody. So it's his show. And if he wants you in the show, then you get a big role. And in this situation, she had a big role, especially given this was done online. So I would not be surprised, but I'd wonder if they got his computer and get his hard drive to see who else he was talking to.
Exactly. Would love to know. Agent Golden, Attorney Greg Isaacs, thank you both kindly. Coming up next, does the detective finally get through to the defendant? You'll see the dramatic conclusion of the interview after the break.
Lumia tried today.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. We've been showing you the police interview prior to the arrest of Hayden Berkebile for the death of victim Grace Ann Sparks. And didn't take the detective, Chaz Terry, very long to get Berkebile to his breaking point. About 34 minutes. We're counting. Here's the conclusion of their interview.
So, one of two things can happen. Either you can sit, you can tell the truth. Talk about this, and we can talk about what your options are. But if you want to sit and you want to frame it in half-truths, because it's difficult for you to take self-responsibility for what are your actions. So basically, I will not have a She was willing to pay, abuse herself, cut herself, do whatever for you. No, you wanted to end your own words. I want to this for you. I want to end you. There was something else going on with you that day. You didn't want to play. You wanted to never wanted to. You told me that. You know what? Maybe this Hayden didn't want to do it. Maybe this Hayden didn't want to do it. But that Hayden that said October 29th, 2019, you're not going to do it. There was something different going on with you, Hayden. What was going on with you? Dude, your changed on the dime. What was going on with you? You went from caring to destructive. You went from love to hate. You went from live to die. What caused that? You went from hating to somebody else. If I didn't believe that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You didn't give a about anybody that day in that moment except you. What caused that? What was going on with you? What was in your head causing that? Hey, you. Why were you so angry? You told her, stop thinking about it, stick a in your mouth and pull a finger. You didn't tell her that in June. You didn't tell her that in May. What was different about that day? I know you were having financial difficulties. What pushed you to the point that you pushed her past her point? I believe you didn't want to. But you did. What caused it? What's the reason? What did you do? What pushed you to push her past her point? Because it didn't seem like you hated it. What was going on? That was like two different people. But you gotta tell me, you have to make me understand this part. What pushed you to the point where you pushed her like that?
Because she wanted it.
No. You wanted it.
She told me.
She wanted anything you wanted, Hayden.
She told me.
So here's the thing. We even went from when you first started even talking about it. I'll go pay myself, man. You go. Every time she tried to do it from the ground, you don't use it. You were building at that point. You were going through something. I don't know what. There was something emotionally building in you at that point. Because at that point, then, you stepped on the gas. Every time she talked about her work, no, you said, "Kevin, you kill yourself," I can say. You know how many always wrong. You do what I tell you. You were dealing with something. What pushed you to the point that you pushed her past her point? What were you doing? You were going through something. And that's what I need to understand. For me to be able to stay in my life. This is a big else who made some bad choices, who made some bad calls, who made some bad decisions. It's so obvious that you were dealing with someone else. And whatever you were dealing with, her death was the result of that. So you don't think you understand. Either you were a red general high, or you were dealing with some that was too big for you. And it manifested itself with her death.
Isn't that the truth? Well said by Detective Chaz Terry there in that interview. Tell me what you think. Tweet us at Court TV. Let us know your thoughts on this. I see victim blaming going on here as I'm watching this. I want to know what my guests think. Still with me in Atlanta, retired DEA Special Agent Ted Golden, and in Knoxville, Tennessee, criminal defense attorney Greg Isaacs. Agent Golden, when he said she wanted it, all I could think was like, wow. You know, he's going to blame her. And I kept thinking about that brilliant analogy you gave us, the pimp analogy. You know, he's in control, his show, and how the detective put it back on him and said, no, she wanted what you wanted. What did you think of that point in their conversation?
Well, you know, a lot of times people don't realize how the female's mentality is, I got to please him. I got to please him. I got to do what he wants me to do. In spite of being beaten, abused, passed around like a sock, they still want to please him. And in this situation, it's the same way. She's mentally wrapped around his finger. He could say, you know, cut off your big toe, your right big toe, and she cut it off because she thinks that he is her daddy. He's her man. He's controlling her. He's everything in the world to her. So she trusts him impeccably. So much so, if you think about prostitutes, they're on a corner and the pimp is watching, okay? And they can walk away if they want to, get in the car and never be found again. But they stay and they come back for more. And that's her mentality. She's coming back for more. And the level of excitement and acceptance that he gives her makes her feel like she's the best thing in the world. And whatever my daddy says, I'm going to do it because he loves me and he trusts me and I trust him. Mm-hmm. That's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is.
It is. It's sickening the way he groomed her. I used the word yesterday. I'll use it again. Brainwashing. To me, it's like brainwashing, you know, that goes on through all those years, you know, when her brain isn't even fully formed as a 13-year-old when they first meet. Greg Isaacs, tell me, you know, as an attorney, when you watch this, you know, we're seeing an interview, the two of them talking, exchanging information, but you know very well the detective's extracting evidence from this guy to be used at trial. Tell me what was jumping out at you, if you would, please, as you were watching him and what the detective was kind of really trying to get at with his questioning.
Well, Julie, one thing, you've seen this interrogation evolve, and here at the end, when he is getting ready to break Berkebile, you could see the emotion with the defendant, but you also saw him want to establish that things were different on the day that she pulled the trigger in the game of Russian roulette, where Berkebile had control. So he tried to clearly draw that line of demarcation. You know, often during trials, I'll take notes and write my closing argument, and the alliteration he had was really powerful. You went from caring to destructive, love to hate, living to die, all in that one day. What was going on with you? I mean, how powerful. And the more powerful Chaz Terry got, the more diminutive Berkebile got. But, you know, Julie, we talked about in the beginning, this may be a precedent-setting case for can words kill. But in listening to this interrogation, I think maybe we've got it wrong. Because this is a girl with a severe mental illness, suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, and this individual knew she was mentally ill. She said, "Don't hurt me, you have control," and he told her to pull the trigger. I think you could make a case that that's a knowing, intentionally killing, which is a second-degree homicide under Tennessee law. When you have someone mentally ill and you tell them to pull the trigger, his hand was as much on that trigger through that virtual chat as it was as if he was there.
That is so fascinating, Greg, and I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, because what a brilliant point you make. You think they could have charged him more severely on the facts?
Absolutely, as this interrogation is unfolded, because you have somebody that is mentally ill, you know they're mentally ill. She has said and signaled, I will do what you want, you're in control. And when you say pull the trigger, when you can see the bullets in the chamber, that was a knowing, intentional killing. It wasn't a reckless homicide where people are spinning the chambers and playing Russian roulette. You have a mentally ill young lady with homicidal ideation that had cut herself, and you told her to pull the trigger. You told her to be blindfolded. Berkebile killed Grace.
Wow, I've got chills just listening to you, Greg. That's really something that you think the prosecutors really could have gone more harshly with the charging here on this one and pursued something, you know, based on an intent, not what we saw here, this criminally negligent homicide. Wow, this is a lot to think about. Excellent points from you both.